next up is Joannes Vermorel. Hopefully I pronounced that right. He's going to give us...
Absolutely.
All right, very good. Welcome to the stream, Joannes. He's going to give us a talk on a tech auditor's perspective on Bitcoin. So go right ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. So I'm Joannes Vermorel. I'm the CEO of an enterprise software company called Lokad that I founded 12 years ago. We have about 50 employees. We are growing. We are profitable. So we barely qualified, I would say, for a startup anymore. But as I would say, as my day job is the CEO of Lokad, but I would say as my night job is tech auditor. So basically 1 decade ago, I started to take money from venture capitalists, investors. Except that instead of selling shares of my own company to earn this money, I decided that it was actually easy to sell something else, which was actually tech audit mission. So, and the idea is very simple. Audit, I would say, investors, venture capitalists are about to invest in a company. The valuation is usually very large, and one of the key reasons for this valuation is usually the technology. And the very odd thing is that although investors put a lot of money on startups that are supposed to have like good technologies, the reality is that usually people don't pay any attention to that. They are going to do like a financial audit. But the financial audit on a startup, you're not going to learn anything. First, because the startup doesn't have any money. So that part is actually kind of easy. And then when it comes to what sort of things that they do with this money, well, they do very, very simple things like paying salaries, which is near trivial to audit. But on the other hand, auditing the tech is both, I would say, it's completely critical. And actually, if you don't do that, and there is like, I would say there has been like a very ongoing trend for pretty much forever to invest without looking at the tech, you end up with things like Theranos or Magic Leap, where frankly, if anybody had done a technical due diligence, would not have invested. Anyway, so bottom line, a decade later, with something like 1 mission per month or so, as a night job, I've audited, I would say, dozens and dozens and dozens of startups for doing like tech audit. And when I say technological audit, I really mean actually looking at the code, not just talking to people and getting their opinion. So usually the way I audit and that's this kind of skills. I will apply this exact set of skills to, I would say, to Bitcoin Cash. So it's the idea is first to assess whether the tech roadmap makes sense, and whether everything that is and what is being done in the company at the technical level is making sense according to this roadmap. You see, that's what a tech audit is, and whether it justifies a high valuation or not. That's typically the question that is being asked from me. And then the next thing is, what sort of recommendation can you have? And usually the recommendations are not technical, just because it's not the right level. It would be just a detail. I mean, you can have a technical recommendation, but usually if there is any recommendation, it's a more high-level recommendation. It's about people. Are the team that you've gathered, is it a suitable team? What is the dynamic of the team? Is it a good one, a bad one? And again, I'm looking at from the perspective, is the dynamic going to fulfill the roadmap? So my conclusions and I've been doing like, again, dozens and dozens of similar missions. My conclusions are very varied, and it ranges from basically don't invest, that's I would say it's a trap, to basically this thing is just I would say a jewel. And I've had the chance to meet CTOs that are actually and CEOs that are actually much more brilliant than myself, and which confirmed that in the year that followed by having fantastic growth that are way beyond what I have personally achieved with my own company. So let's have this experience of, I would say, of tech audits apply to the case of Bitcoin. And so I had a good look at all the, I would say, the code bases that are around. We have different projects as well. And I had the chance to basically engage and talk and discuss with many of the, I would say, the prominent tech contributors. So if we look at Bitcoin, and when I say Bitcoin, I mean Bitcoin Cash, but I just use Bitcoin for short. If you look at Bitcoin as one large company, I would say it's not completely, I would say, a dysfunctional, it's not a completely dysfunctional perspective. You just end up with a relatively balkanized, atomized IT department. And this happened, I mean, not typically in startups, but in larger companies, it frequently happens that you have large, IT companies where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing and whatnot. These sort of things happen. But this thing, I would say, it's not a dysfunctional perspective because this community, everybody is in the same boat. If Bitcoin sinks, then basically all those people involved are sinking with it. On the other hand, obviously, if there is like a big success, it doesn't mean that everybody is going to be a winner. Some teams, may be much bigger winners than others. And who is the CEO? Well, the CEO is the market. It's you, it's whoever, it's literally all the things that are driving the adoption. So it's a loose analogy, but bear with me. Now, what do we have as a starting point? The starting point is that we have a legacy implementation for this currency project, which is basically the Satoshi Client. So realistically, the Satoshi Client is very, very difficult to remove for this community, just because the whole ecosystem has been built around that. So you can fork it, yes. To replace it entirely is very, very difficult. And if you look at, although the original Bitcoin has been forked nowadays, many times, one of them being the present interest, being Bitcoin Cash, the Satoshi Client has been, has remained central. And the key reason is that the ecosystem is kind of built around this thing. So it's very, very hard to remove it, or you replace it for something that is completely different. But that's another case of I would say, for the discussion. So I'm going to stick with basically things that have been built around the legacy Satoshi Client. So now we have a product, and we can audit that. And when I first delved, I encountered Bitcoin back in 2011, but I didn't really pay attention at the time to the code. I was one of those very lucky early investors in Bitcoin. And for years, I didn't really pay any attention to what was going on, technically. I just had, read the white paper and just thought it was a great idea. So let's invest some, and it worked out well. But when years later, I started to have a look at the code, I realized a few things that were really, I would say, immense surprise for me. So I'm I would say, a trained software engineer, if you want, in addition of being like a CEO. And the thing is, the Satoshi Client, security-wise, it's immensely battle tested. So yes, when you look at the code, yes, there is no obvious flows of securities that you can exploit. The thing is tremendously battle tested. But if you look at the code base of the Satoshi Client for any other perspectives that is basically maintainability, scalability, or even features, it's kind of a nightmare. And actually, when you look at the contribution of Satoshi, himself, herself, whoever, I was kind of shocked to see that it was software-wise incredibly crappy code. I mean, like amateur level. So I've developed, my own pet theory that in order to have the genius, to have the breakthrough of Bitcoin, you had in many ways you had to be completely ignorant of software engineering. And that was because this person or those persons were so ignorant of all those things that basically they kind of managed to do what was thought as being the impossible. If you want to do the impossible, you have first not to know that it was impossible. But nonetheless, doing the impossible is incredible. That was like the spark of genius. But mostly it was very, very, very bad software engineering. And it went from there with contribution from Bitcoin Core. Things improved a little. But not that much. And then I'm going to revisit when I said it's a nightmare. Obviously, a technological contribution, a product, is only a nightmare with regard of a roadmap. It's not something that is completely absolute. It depends on what is your intent with this piece of tech, piece of software. So let's let's go back to what is the roadmap of Bitcoin. So if we say that the roadmap is to make Bitcoin the cash of the world, and and by the way, here we have first I would say a shocking element in this space is that basically there is only one team that I'm aware of that has like an actual a digestible, to the point roadmap, and that's Bitcoin ABC. And literally, so what are the roadmap? It's literally, things that are in addition to the invention of Bitcoin. It was basically a certain set of properties that were in addition to the original Bitcoin. Is that fees must remain like super low forever. Security should be instant, not hours, but instant. Privacy should be absolute, and I would say security is paramount. And I will get to those elements, but basically you can have a look online to the fine print of the roadmap. But the first thing is that there is plenty of teams in this ecosystem, but the first thing is that there is only one team, to my knowledge, that has a very sharp, to the point roadmap. So I will use that, as we say, as my reference for an analysis, just because there is no alternative, there is no other roadmap. So first, I'm taking that as a criterion of what do we want to achieve, and then you can look at the code is it going to bring me there? And if you look at the code of the Satoshi client, you would say it's a starting point. You cannot remove it due to ecosystem effect, or at least not in a short time frame. But the reality is that this code base is mostly a nightmare. And I was really shocked, I would say, in the level of, I would say, of maintainability. There are plenty of things that are done in ways that are, I would say, trivially bad, where literally you could see that it was people lacking experience. So now, if I look at this roadmap, again, we had one team that has a roadmap, and pretty much a lot of other teams, including, by the way, if I take the team of Bitcoin Core, they don't have any roadmap. If you look at what if you look at what they are planning ahead for Bitcoin, there is no roadmap at all. They have a tiny few technical things, but literally this is not a roadmap. That's those things that they are planning are not going to make any difference in the grand scheme of things about Bitcoin, the currency. So, and if you look at other teams, let's say I would say maybe Bitcoin Unlimited, BCHN, again, I've had a close look at what they're stating, what their roadmap is, and I would say it's very thin. There is clearly, I would say, a lack of vision of what do they want to do 10 years down the road. Now, we had one team with a roadmap. What about the accomplishments? And if I look again at the accomplishment over the last few years, one team has literally delivered all the accomplishments. And let's revisit, those elements that I've taken from the roadmap. That was fees low forever. You needed bigger blocks. That has been done. You wanted to have instant security. Instant security. First, you had to do things so that it would not get worse. So obviously, you had like things that were like replaced by fee. There were plenty of technical details that were actually, and especially having like miners opting for their own inclusion policy for transaction. I mean, it's very technical, but basically there are many ways to, even if you preserve, I would say, the Bitcoin of old, to make, I would say, instant security worse. And basically ABC delivered a series of small tweaks that at least prevented the situation from getting worse. So to maintain, I would say, a status quo that was reasonable behavior for what is called zero conf, like instant security. Then you want privacy. Privacy, the problem with Bitcoin is that all the transactions are public, and what was not a problem in the early days of Bitcoin is now becoming, I would say, a problem that companies have the technology to basically analyze the entire graph of transactions and de-anonymize to a large extent what is going on. So that's I would say, an emerging threat for Bitcoin that was not properly analyzed in the early days. And in order to do that, well, you need to have certain mechanism to have more privacy. And again, ABC with basically Schnorr signature delivered elements that are key ingredients in letting the community at large achieve this more desirable privacy. And then security. And one of the things that people don't realize with the Bitcoin core network is that you have plenty of problems. Is that the security is kind of weak because you cannot really delegate your trust when you have a wallet to a hardware wallet in a way that is completely safe. I'm not going to go into the technical details, but bottom line, one of the first things that was done, by the way, by the initial fork of Bitcoin Cash was to make sure that end users could actually delegate the trust to a hardware device in a way that is completely, I would say, secure end-to-end if they trust the hardware device. It's still not possible on the Bitcoin core. It is very much possible on the, I would say, the Bitcoin Cash side of the fork. Now, you see, there are plenty of other very valuable projects. Don't get me wrong, about this. Bcash is a fantastic project. Electron Cash is another fantastic project. But if I look at as an auditor at the added value, I'm talking to the CEO. CEO is you, the market, and say, where in your company, what is really the core asset that are really generating that justify the valuation that you have for your company. And I would say literally it boils down to pretty much 90% plus of that is basically the work done by one team, Bitcoin ABC. Now we can get to that, but first you have to acknowledge that literally the value and the accomplishment, they all come from one place. I'm not diminishing the other accomplishments; they're great, but in terms of order of magnitude, it's just there are some stuff that are not on the same level, and that's a problem when you have people who achieve really a lot. Is that even if you do very well, it might be humbling. I'm a CEO of a 50 people company. When I audit a company and there are 500 and the CEO is immensely more successful than I am, it's humbling. Even if I consider myself to be reasonably successful, I'm not Bill Gates, I'm not Zuckerberg. There are people that are fantastically more successful than me. It doesn't mean I hope that what I'm doing is bad, but just that, there are people that are just, absolute genius, much better than what they are doing than I am. Anyway. So you have to, I would say, let go of the ego and try to focus, I would say, in a core fashion to assess where the value comes from, even if it doesn't play well with your personal ego. Now, let's go to this. I said Bitcoin ABC, but actually, Bitcoin ABC has one, very obvious leader, and that's Maurice Eche. And so if you read about Maurice Eche on Reddit, you will learn two things. First, that is the worst tyrant ever. And the second thing is that he's obviously there to sabotage Bitcoin. And he has, and basically it's obvious that he has been planted by the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party. It's obviously a spy planted to sabotage Bitcoin. And he's probably the worst tyrant ever. That's what you can learn from Reddit. And it's very consistent. If you read that, you will have at least a few posts every single day that will bring you this narrative or something along those lines. But when I look at the code contribution, again, at Tech Auditor, I don't look at only what people say. I look at what they do, what they code, what they deliver, what sort of features there is in their product and what they have done, and the sort of technical decisions that they have when facing specific problems. It's very nice. You can actually, with modern code bases, you can even look at the history of commits and look at the discussion that happened at the time. So you can learn a lot by just looking at the code bases. And literally my diagnosis as I would say a tech auditor who has been auditing dozens and dozens and dozens of startups is literally, Maurice Eche is the CTO that you can almost never afford. So, and it's literally, and I've met dozens CTO. We're talking of something that is, on the few percent most, I would say, talented people. Talented on two fronts, basically smart and get things done. And it's very rare to have the combination of both. You have people that are very smart, but they don't get anything done. So that, and by the way, that's probably the most dangerous sort of people because they are very smart. So you can discuss with them a lot. They look intelligent. They have plenty of very good ideas. And but they can be a complete distraction. They can be a complete distraction, and then they won't deliver anything of value. So that's the danger, is to have a very smart CTO for your company, but it doesn't deliver anything. And then get things done is very important. But again, Bitcoin is very fragile. If you break the currency, it can be completely toast. So so you want to make sure that your software project, you need to have to get things done, but in a highly prudent manner where you just don't blow up the whole thing while doing so. So that requires a very specific attitude. And nonetheless, you should be very, very prudent, but you need to get things done nonetheless. You should not be so prudent that nothing is happening anymore, just because, again, you have a roadmap that you want to achieve, which is low fee forever, instant security, absolute privacy, and and pervasive security. You need to deliver those things, and they are not there yet, not quite. So so there is still work to be done. Now, so if I'm talking to CEO and I was auditing, this loose, tentacular Bitcoin company where there is like the CTO and there is this IT division with many CTOs, one of them being a bit more prominent, I would say the worst mistake that you could do at this point of time is fire your CTO. Literally nothing good would come out of it. And quite the opposite. You could literally, if we look at the fact that all the accomplishment comes from one place, I would say the worst mistakes, fire the CTO, I would say with very high probability, the team, Bitcoin ABC, would dissolve one way or another, and then you would be left with only a tiny fraction of what you have. So retaining your CTO is probably one of the first survival objectives that you could have. And by the way, that's also one conclusion that is not too infrequent when you have like very, very good teams. I tell investors, make very sure that you preserve, these CTOs, these teams. Otherwise, you're just going to, break the magic that is making the value of the company you're investing in. If you make an early stage investment in Facebook and you remove Zuckerberg, chances are that at the end of the road, you end up with a second MySpace, not Facebook that has a lot of value, but MySpace. So you can disagree. You can think Zuckerberg has plenty of flaws. Yeah, sure, he has plenty of flaws. He might, as a person, you may not like him. But if you want to think as an investor, was Zuckerberg, a key ingredient in making Facebook valuable? Absolutely. Flaws and all. Same thing about, you could think about, I would say, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, those sort of exceedingly talented, lead tech leaders. They were not nice people. They're not nice people. They are tough. They're ruthless. They have plenty of flaws. They are not, I would say, they are not your best buddy. They will not be your beer buddy. But nonetheless, don't confuse what you perceive as the capacity to execute something and create value. Now, in terms of if I've done the technical assessment of the community, what sort of recommendation could I give to the CEO? Again, we're assuming that Bitcoin, the community as a whole, is a company, and the general audience is the distributed CEO of Bitcoin. I would say first, give a break to this team, Bitcoin ABC. And right now, I see a dysfunctional situation where whenever this tech team does anything, the marketing team or some elements in the marketing teams goes completely ballistic against the tech team. And that's very counterproductive. And that's not, there is no positive outcome of that. It just proved that, this tech team is incredibly resilient in terms of harassment. But besides proving their resilience to harassment, it doesn't prove much. So I would say first thing is give those people a break. That will already be a massive improvement. And then the second thing, I would say, give them the credit of authority. And I know that we're living, a period where people think, oh, there is no authority. Authority is just like, it's like an F word. It's something that you cannot pronounce. There is no authority. Oh, because if you have an authority, you have people that are oppressed. No, this is just, an authority in the sense of having more competence to deliver, what you want as part of the roadmap. And when you have people who have, I would say, earned the credits of authority by, over long period of time, so we're talking of multiple years, repeatedly deliver improvement according to a very clear vision that is the roadmap, that has not changed much. You know, it's since the inception. I would say you need to give them the credit of authority, because chances are that if what they are doing seemingly contradict what you think is good, you know, chances are they are right, not you. And again, imagine, and that's a big danger of designing things through consensus, is that consensus, when you design things, especially when it comes to technology through consensus, you end up with pure crap. And by the way, as a tech auditor, one of the things that I would say I pay a lot of attention is to make sure my own belief don't taint my judgment, because I've seen, you know, CTOs doing things that were seemingly completely nonsensical to me. Not complete. I mean, it was very odd, but maybe they were right, you know, and they had achieved a lot of successes and doing things that strike me as odd. But again, my own experience is I'm running, you know, a company, Lokad, that is about predictive supply chain optimization. So I tend to look at things from this perspective, you know, is this technology kind of making sense compared to what I know? But if it's a completely different problem, like a biotech, it may not. So I would say be very skeptical about your own judgment, whether when you see something that comes from a team that has routinely delivered, you know, very reasonable things that turned out to be excellent, you know, time and over. And again, I think the track record of Bitcoin ABC has been completely excellent so far, especially considering that they have, I would say, very, very little funding. I would say give them the credit of authority. Obviously, you would say, oh, it's completely irrational. We should be able to challenge everything. I would say, yes, you should be able to challenge everything, but beware of the Dunning-Kruger effect, you know, where you just know a little about something, and then you learn a few things, and then you think you're entitled to challenge people who have literally spent a decade of their life to become master of the game. Chances are that if you've only spent, you know, 1 year learning about those things, that you know nothing, that you know almost nothing, and that's your ideas, they're just very, very crappy. And again, I say from personal experience, I got involved with Bitcoin in 2011 as an investor. And then I realized it took me something like 8 years to realize, when I started to go, you know, in the code, to realize that I knew almost nothing about the project. I thought I was, you know, I had a lot of knowledge, but I realized until I went into all the technicalities, and I discussed with many of the people that have earned my respect, is that it's very difficult. It's a field of its own. It takes, you know, years of intense thinking to even see the problem the right way. So give them the credit authority. And I would say the last thing, so and maybe the thing before that is due to that, is that understand that what this community needs is strong technical leadership. And strong technical leadership is not people who are going to make people happy. Again, that's something that you would see on the media. They would say, oh, you have the strong leaders, that is the charismatic leaders, where everybody loves him. And if you look at the history of Apple and Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs was hated by a lot of people around him. So you see, the strong leadership means that you will deal with malcontent and dissatisfied all the time. And unfortunately, that's the price of greatness. You know, if you're great, you have a lot of people who are just not able to see as far as you do, and they will be malcontent, and then they will complain loudly all the time. So I would say, unfortunately, Bitcoin Cash needs strong leadership. And people, I would say, my message for the community, which represent, you know, the true CEO of Bitcoin Aware, is don't pay too much attention to all those people who complain loudly, who complain about any sort of authority. You need this authority, you need this leadership. And yes, you might have some risk of having, I would say, a tyrant, but frankly, you're very, very far. You know, if you say that power is corrupt and absolute power corrupt, absolutely. Bitcoin ABC has so little means, so little funding, that they are very, very far from any situations where they could become corrupt because they have so much power. They have actually, I would say, exceedingly little power and exceedingly little, I would say, funding as well. Which brings me to maybe my conclusion point would be, if there is one thing that as a CEO you can do, you know, is invest more in what is making the core value of your product, which is, so the core value of Bitcoin is literally right now it's coming from dominantly from one team, Bitcoin ABC. And so my message would be to the CEO: donate to ABC, let them do what they have done, but just more. That's, I would say, the single thing that you can do to make the product better. Because make no mistake, you can think it's just a marketing game, that it's just about, you know, advocating, just evangelizing the whole world. But if I go back to the roadmap, you know, the product is nowhere near finished. It has still plenty of, I would say, of loose ends that needs to be resolved. Bitcoin ABC has a roadmap on how to execute that. Technically, it's very sound, but it's not there yet. And so if you really, you know, believe in this thing, believe in this company in the sense that, you know, it's other people that you're close to, you know, a company has this a body of people, then giving to the company that has delivered the most achievements so far the means to keep doing that, it probably is the single one best thing that you can do today. And that would conclude maybe this talk.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joannes. We have just one question, if you have a moment, from Lynn in the chat. His question is, how would you resolve governance in Bitcoin Cash? People are under the illusion that there is an alternative to just have one leader for governance. I don't believe in that. Especially when it comes to innovation. I've seen dozens and dozens of companies. I've never seen any successful company where in the end, it didn't boil down to one man or one woman. You would say, oh, but you have such a track factor. If this person dies, it's dead. I would say, yeah, if Steve Jobs had died, you know, as a teenager, Apple would never have existed. Yes. So when you think of governance, I would say, pick your tyrant and stick with it. It may not be the answers that you like, but I've never seen any others that works. And if you look at things that are, you know, managed through governance, you know, with body of people, with committees and whatnot, they literally gives you abysmal results, and usually it costs insane amount of money to get almost nothing. So I would say, yes, having a tyrant is kind of bad, but again, Bitcoin is not a democracy. You know, this is not a political system. What we are engineering is a currency. A currency that has at its core, I would say, engineering principle. It's a currency that instead of being like something that was done maybe out of luck, it's something in the first time of the history, it's a currency that is engineered. And you need to have like a lead engineer, and that's the good governance. And then if this tyrant become corrupt, at some point there will be a revolution and they will be overthrown. So I'm not overly, you know, I'm not overly concerned with that. But first, you need the tyrant, because otherwise you will not get the very fast-paced innovation that you need. All right, that's great. Very good. Okay, thank you so much, Joannes Vermorel of Lokad.com. Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So the chat really appreciated your talk. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.